Hi, Glenn here, and I want to share some information with you that I hope will help you in trying to improve your health and losing weight and stuff. You may not all need to lose weight. Some of you may have health problems, but you don't seem to gain weight. That doesn't mean this advice won't assist you. For the past year plus, I have looked into nutrition and diet. I've learned that the vast majority of doctors know almost nothing about nutrition and diet because the universities, not just in America but around the world, most universities do not teach doctors much of anything about nutrition and diet. They focus on the other medical stuff, and they leave nutrition and diet to the nutritionists and dietitians, and unfortunately it can be quite challenging outside of a hospital setting to get access to a nutritionist or dietitian. I wanted to, but my insurance company said unless it's in the hospital you can't. So that was very frustrating. So I did a lot of research. There's a lot of BS out there. There are a lot of lies from the food industry, beverage industry, pharmaceutical industry, agricultural industry, politicians, and healthcare industry, health insurance industry, life insurance industry, and other industries are involved. Diet industry, they're all involved in trying to confuse things, and they do it in a lot of different ways. They hire people who they pay large sums of money to lie about what you need to know. They lie about which foods are dangerous. They lie about which foods are bad for you. They lie about which foods you should eat lots of. They also lie about famous people in the field of nutrition who have tried to teach us the right things. And they also, these organizations, these industries, these companies will do exactly what the tobacco industry did for most of my life and before I was alive, in which they formed the Tobacco Institute, and they supposedly researched the effects of tobacco on people. But what they were really doing was they were distributing lies, false study results to the public, to politicians, until finally there was somebody who came forward from the industry and blew it all apart. He was an insider, and he exposed the lies and the deceptions and stuff. So they have done this, and they've done it very, very well. You know, it doesn't matter whether you're talking about dairy or processed meats or sugar or salt even. They have really, really muddied the water for a very, very long time, making it very hard for people to make informed decisions. And they also play you against each other. They pay large sums of money to influence nonprofit organizations, governmental organizations, and other organizations in order to manipulate you. Like, for example, there are claims that they have paid off organizations and politicians and such to lie to you about what is actually good for your health and what is not. And as a result, it has become increasingly difficult to find good sources of information on what to eat and what to avoid. They've also weaponized it because they have thrown race into it. They've thrown religion into it. They have basically pulled out everything that triggers people and thrown it into the discussion to make people not listen to the truth. There are huge numbers of people out there that have been deceived through emotional manipulation first, and then a mixture of truth and lies, to the point where you can't have a discussion with them because they refuse to listen to logic. They refuse to listen to facts. They don't trust studies because they're firmly rooted in the fact that you are part of the conspiracy, when in fact the conspiracy is being foisted on Americans, on New Zealanders, on Europeans, and on other large groups of people to make us believe the lies so that they can make us sick, keep us sick, and medicate us and use surgery on us incessantly to increase their profits. Now you may think, that's crazy, Glenn. How could they possibly do that? I mean, these are separate industries, separate companies. Yeah, but a lot of the people that are in controlling positions on boards of directors and in controlling positions as far as majority shareholders, they have their hands in multiple industries, and some of them are psychopaths and other people who have no conscience, like narcissists, and they don't care if they hurt people. They're only interested in money and power. So it's not easy. And if you don't have a good education, if you haven't been you haven't been taught how to analyze, how to research, how to identify valid research studies from invalid ones, and so on and so forth, it is so difficult to sort through all the BS and find the facts. It was very frustrating for me. I went to my doctor, who actually did study nutrition in university, but she's been out for several years, and she kind of has forgotten it, apparently. My cardiologist, when he told me that I've got certain health problems I didn't know about, the only thing he could say was, do the Mediterranean diet or the DASH diet. He had no other advice for me because he admitted he didn't know anything about nutrition. Now, statistically speaking, 90% of people who go to see a cardiologist are there because of food and beverage based problems. 90%. And cardiologists generally don't know squat about nutrition and diet. How can that even be allowed? It shouldn't be allowed. Don't you agree? Well, okay. I am not a doctor, dietitian, nutritionist, a specialist, or anything like that. I'm just a regular guy who's done his research and tried to find the truth. And it's been hard. Some of the things that I'm going to share with you today took me a long time to find out, because it's not stuff that's even commonly discussed amongst or by the people who are actually trying to get the truth out to the public. And that was very, very upsetting for me. So first of all, if you haven't watched my video about calories, forget about calories. Don't count calories. Calories are BS. Let me ask you a question. In your stomach, do you have acid or do you have fire? Obviously, you have acid, right? There's no fire burning in your belly. You're not a pot-belly stove. Well, you may look like one, but you're not one, right? And the truth of the matter is when they measure calories, they use fire. They burn everything to find out how many calories are in that substance. But your body works on biochemistry, not a radiative heat process. Yes, heat does affect your taste, your sense of smell. Heat or coldness. Heat and cold affect how well your body can digest your food. So if you're eating a lot of very cold foods, your body's not going to be as effective at digesting them, because it's interfering with the action of your stomach. But calories are a lie. They don't really exist. So you don't need to look at them anymore. What they should have on there are things like glycemic index and glycemic load. Glycemic index is a measurement of how much sugar you're going to get in that food. Glycemic load is, well, think about go ahead and think about find the curve. Okay, so glycemic load is how fast you're going to get that sugar spike. So if you have a high glycemic load, glycemic index, you're going to get one of those big old spikes, and then it's going to drop fast too. If you have a high glycemic index low, crazy, I know, but there it is. So you want to look at the fat. You also want to look at the salt content and the potassium content, and not just sodium. We also look at salt and potassium, and I'll explain why in a minute. And again, look at the oil. I would try to avoid using a lot of corn oil. Any oils that don't have both omega-3s and omega-6s should be avoided, and you should definitely only be buying unrefined oils. They say virgin, extra virgin, cold pressed, and as long as it doesn't say refined, or have any indication of using heat or chemicals to extract the oil, it should be okay. So next, I want you to understand. I know that some of you do not like drinking water. Okay, and I've been drinking water all of my life. I like drinking water because I know that it's good for my health. But I know that some people feel like, oh, it doesn't taste like anything, so I don't like it. You need to change your mindset about that. Okay, water is critical for your health. If your water drops enough in your body, then your brain stops functioning correctly, your body stops functioning correctly, your muscles won't work right, your digestive system won't work right, your blood vessels won't work right, your entire body goes into a state of chaos. And if you're working in a situation where you're sweating a lot, you should be drinking water, then water with electrolytes, then water with electrolytes, water, alternating between the two, because electrolytes are what allow you to sweat, but when you sweat, the electrolytes go out with the water. So eventually you run out of electrolytes, and then you go from heat exhaustion to heat stroke, where you cannot sweat, therefore you cannot cool off, and your body will start to fail. And you'll experience things like nausea and confusion and dizziness and weakness and sleepiness and stuff. But anyways, please drink more water. Also, drink less coffee, tea, soda, and especially energy drinks. If you're going to use an energy drink, the best choice would be coffee. If you have, for some reason, cannot get coffee, then turn to an energy drink that has no more than about 80 milligrams of caffeine in it. That's about the equivalent of 1 cup of coffee. And the reason I say that is because, like, if you drink, say for example, Monster is about 150 milligrams. So that's about almost 2 cups of coffee. If you drink Celsius, that's 200 milligrams of caffeine. And that amount of caffeine, 150, 200 milligrams, it can be dangerously bad for you, especially if you have sensitivities. It can also trigger your heart to behave abnormally. Caffeine has that effect on your heart. So please, limit your intake of caffeine, limit your intake of the coffee, tea, soda, and energy drinks, because in addition, some of those are diuretics, which means that they will cause you to urinate more often, and as a result, you'll dehydrate. Also, some of them contain a lot of sodium in them, and that'll cause you to dehydrate even faster, especially salt in the energy drinks and sodas. That can be very bad for you because it makes you feel like you've drunk something that helps you to hydrate, but in fact, you're dehydrating yourself because you're adding more sugar. Before I explain more about salt, I want to explain that one of the simplest things you can do to lose weight is to decrease the amount of salt in your diet. Now, again, I'm not a medical expert. I'm just using my research to help you. You do need to talk to your doctor about this if you have problems with low blood pressure, which is also called hypotension. Okay, I have hypertension. It's a family problem, although lately my blood pressure has been great. And that may be because I've made significant changes to the amount of sodium that I consume every day. But salt can be a great way to retain water. And water, a gallon of water is about 8 pounds. So if you are consuming extra salt, as you know, salt kind of collects water. And in your blood cell, or in your body, all over your body, if you've got extra salt, your cells are going to suck up extra water. And that's going to make you heavier. It's just water weight. But if you consume less salt, the water weight will go down because your body won't need to hold as much salt. And you're asking, well, why would my body need to do that? It has to control the level of salt in your vessels, in your cells, and everything. It's called salinity. How much salt is in something like water is salinity. And your body can't handle it if it gets too high. It can cause cell destruction. Okay? So, speaking of that, salt contains sodium or it contains potassium. Both of those are conductive. Now, if you get potassium salt, which is potassium chloride, like the no salt brand, that has got more sodium than regular salt. And MSG has about 1/3 the sodium of regular salt. So if you're trying to deal with problems like hypertension, angina, atherosclerosis, arteriosclerosis, palpitations, racing heart, anything like that, you should definitely be reducing your intake of salts. Okay, it doesn't matter whether it's potassium chloride or sodium chloride or MSG, you should be taking less. If you're using regular salt, switch to MSG. If you're using potassium, switch to sodium. Talk to your medical expert who is trained in this area and discuss it, because potassium is going to cause more conductivity in your heart, which can cause your heart to malfunction. It's going to cause more conductivity than sodium, which is going to cause, and so those are bad. That's a bad thing to have happen. You want your heart to function normally. You don't want to have it acting erratically because there's so much extra sodium or potassium in it that your heart is just acting crazy, which has been a problem for me. I have various kinds of palpitations that have been bothering me for years now, and I didn't know it had anything to do with salt. In fact, I only found out this year, quite by accident, not from my research. I figured it out, and then I researched it and discovered it was true. So, if you're going now you're going to say, well, I can't have MSG. Okay, if you can't have MSG, if you legitimately eat products with MSG, you don't know there's MSG in them, and you have some kind of reaction, okay, that's fine. Find an alternative. Okay, maybe some Mrs. Dash or one of those other table blends that don't have salt in them, the no salt stuff, but not potassium chloride. Okay, you need to understand, when you consume a kind of salt, MSG, sodium chloride, potassium chloride, one of those salts, for that salty flavor. And I understand some people don't feel that MSG is a substitute for salt, because MSG is a combination of a sweet flavor and a salty flavor. So it's a very nice flavor, but it's not the same as salt. It's not a separate flavor. It's two flavors combined. So the idea of edamame being its own flavor is kind of silly. But let's look at what happens when you consume too much sodium or potassium. So the first thing that happens is it goes from your digestive system into your blood vessels. Okay? And the more you've consumed, the more is going to go into your blood vessels. And yes, your kidney can remove some of it, but not all of it. It does take time for it to extract it from your blood vessels. And if you keep on adding more and more and more, your blood salt level will rise. Your salinity will rise. And eventually it will get to the point where there will be so much extra in your blood that it'll increase the conductivity in electrical parts of your body, which includes muscles, like your heart. It'll increase conductivity in other areas as well, like other muscles, and maybe even in the brain. That can cause palpitations or arrhythmia, racing heart, ventricular tachycardia, for example, and so on and so forth. It can also, because your blood salinity is going up, if it goes up enough, what happens is it starts to damage the inside of your blood vessels. It actually kills what's called the endothelial cells. Those are the cells that line the inside of your blood vessels. So they're very inside cells. When that happens, your body sends very low density lipoproteins to cover that wound and act as a bandage to protect it. But if you keep on raising your blood salt levels, it's going to keep on wounding it over and over again, and that plaque buildup will get bigger and bigger and bigger. So also, when it's at lower levels, it'll cause things like hypertension and arteriosclerosis, which is hardening of the arteries. And so you have high blood pressure, and your arteries are getting harder because of the damage from the salt, because of the salinity going up. So when you start having atherosclerosis, where there's plaque being laid down to cover the missing endothelial cells, the wounds inside of your blood vessels, then you're starting to come to the area where you're risking heart attacks, strokes, dementia, Alzheimer's, and other kinds of senility. Obviously, not something you want to do. So please, reduce the amount of salt. Now, I know this works, and I know this because for several years now, since I was living in Indonesia, I was having palpitations, and I didn't know what was going on. And then later on, I started having these twinges in my chest, especially near my heart, and I didn't know what that was. It was pre-angina. And I went to a doctor, they did a stress test. Stress tests only check the function of your heart. It isn't going to discover this kind of damage that's happening unless it's advanced enough to negatively affect your heart's function. And my heart hasn't been damaged to the point where the function is negatively affected. So I did a different test, a calcium scan, which is done by MRI. And the MRI can detect calcium in the plaque buildup, because calcium gets laid down with plaque. And they discovered that there's enough plaque in some of my arteries, somewhere between 50 to 74%, which is bad. Not bad enough that they need to put a stent in or do an angiogram, which is where they run a tube up into a big blood vessel inside your thigh and run it up to your heart to look at it directly, which is what they did for my dad. But it's dangerous. Okay? So, lower your salt. When I found out that salt was causing the angina, the pain and twinges around my heart, was causing not just the hypertension, but also the palpitations too, then I started to research, because none of these experts that I had been looking at, not the ones who were telling the truth, not the ones that were lying, were talking about how salt affects us, which I don't understand. But there it is. And I found research studies that go back decades that demonstrate these relationships. Now, there's not a direct relationship. It's these steps that happen that lead from one thing to another to another. Okay? So let's move on to sugar. So first of all, eat less and look at glycemic index and glycemic load. Drink more water. Consume less salt and consume less sugar. Why? Well, we have gone absolutely crazy with the amount of sugar we eat nowadays. Between salt and sugar, it isn't the fat and carbs in general that we've been eating tons of over the past few decades, since the whole scare with the committee that came out with a report about fat being dangerous. It's the trans fats that they started putting in our foods. It's the salt and the sugar and the oil they started putting in our foods. And some of you are going to say it's the seed oils. No, it's the refined oils and certain other kinds of oils. I'm not going to get into that in detail at this point. I need to do more research so I can be more specific about that. But it's not seed oils in general. There are certain oils that are bad because they don't have a balance of omega-3s and omega-6s, like corn oil. Corn oil is not a good choice. It's also bad if you reuse the same oil over and over again, because the more you use it, the more trans fats you create in it. Okay? So, ease up on the oil, there are lots of ways you can cook without oil, and it doesn't mean boiling. I've done plenty of things where I sauteed without margarine, without butter, and without oil, and it was fine. You just have to do it a different way. All right, but you need to cut back on sugar, real sugar. I know people say, oh, but agave is safe. No, it's not. It's got lots of fructose in it. And they say, oh, what about maple sugar, or maple syrup? No, it's got lots of fructose. Table sugar has lots of fructose. Cinnamon has a 50-50 glucose and fructose. Of course, you don't get a ton of sugar because you don't use a ton of cinnamon. and invert sugar and molasses and cane sugar and all these other kinds of sugars, fructose syrup and high fructose corn syrup. Those have lots of sugars. Obviously, the high fructose corn syrup is one of the worst. It has some of the highest amounts of fructose in it. And this is bad, but I'll explain in a minute why. But the things that sugar can do to us includes metabolic disorders like diabetes. It can also result in our bodies producing too much insulin so that it produces more insulin than there is sugar, and then the blood sugar decreases so fast you have a blood sugar crash. Have you ever eaten too much at Thanksgiving, for example, or at another big a buffet maybe, and then you're like, oh, I want to take a nap? That's hypoglycemic crash, where there's not enough energy in your blood and you want to fall asleep. It happens to me a lot now because I've been my body just overreacts to sugar and produces too much insulin. It's crazy. So when you get into a hypoglycemic state, you'll want to fall asleep. Unless you're very physically active at the time, your body will be saying sleep, sleep, sleep. And I will fall asleep for half an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, depending on how big of a drop in my blood sugar it produces. I have to be very careful. I can't use maltodextrin. I can't use dextrin, which is supposedly a soluble fiber, but which is actually starch. I can't have sugars on an empty stomach. I have to be careful about glucose and lactose and sucrose and all that stuff. Even some of the sugar substitutes like xylitol and maltodextrin, like I said, and sorbitol and several other ones. I can't have them. It causes me to have that hypoglycemic reaction. So you can end up with that. You can end up with prediabetes. You can end up with diabetes. Diabetes has lots of scary consequences. You can lose your vision. You can have your toes starting to rot off. And then you have to have them amputated because they turn black. They're dead. They're gangrenous. And if you don't have them removed, you can get septic condition in your body that can kill you. So they remove them. But your body can't heal those wounds correctly. And over time, you lose. Every time you screw up with your blood sugar, you lose more and more and more. I sat next to a woman who was missing both parts of both of her feet because of diabetes. I have a friend who has really bad vision because of diabetes. Diabetes is insidious. You can live with it, but it slowly destroys your quality of life. It's horrible. And it went from being something that, unless you had type 1 diabetes, only happened to older people, and now it's happening to huge numbers of children around the world. Look at what schools are serving. Look at what's in the vending machines. You should be angry as parents when you see junk food and fast food and high sugar beverages in schools on their plates in the vending machines. They're killing your children. They're making your children lifelong dependents on medicine when they should be able to live a medicine-free life if you teach them to eat right. Okay? You can also end up with mental health problems. Last year, I did a series where I reviewed over 100 different kinds of chocolates, dark chocolates, medium to very dark, up to 85%. And sometimes I was eating like a bar a day. And I had different kinds of problems. I had problems with the lining of my stomach becoming very irritated to the point where it was very painful. I had problems where one day I started to be very weepy. I started to be very emotional. And I realized it was because I was consuming so much sugar in those dark chocolates that it was affecting my mental health. And as soon as I cut back on the chocolate, as soon as I cut back on the sugars, my mental health cleared up. It was amazing. So if you're having mental health problems, you're emotionally unstable, you're depressed and stuff, reducing your sugar intake can have a huge positive impact that way. Sugar intake, if you have too much, can also cause things like senility, like dementia and Alzheimer's and Lewy body dementia. You can also have poor cognitive function. When I'm in the middle of an excess sugar load, I think very, very slowly. I get confused very, very easily. I make a lot of mistakes. It's extremely frustrating. I cannot use my brain well, and I hate it. If you're going to have any sugar, make sure you have a full meal that isn't full of starches before you have sugar. So, going specifically to glucose versus fructose, which are the two main kinds, glucose is used by your brains, by your muscles. It is extremely important, but you can't have too much of it because your body needs it, but it doesn't need a lot of it. When it gets too much of it, then it has to store it as fat, and or it can store it in a different form of sugar called glycogen. So it either gets stored as lipids, which is fats, or it gets stored as glycogen, which is a type of sugar in the cells. And your cells can, depending on what kind of cells, your cells can have both lipids and glycogen, or just one in them. If it's a fat cell, it's going to contain, and it can actually expand and become bigger and bigger. That's why you become fatter and fatter. You're not adding more fat cells to your body. Your fat cells are distorting in size and shape. So when you get in too much glucose, that can happen. When you get in too much fructose, the only part of your body that can actually process fructose is the liver. Your liver is designed to process small amounts of fructose. But if you get in large amounts of fructose, especially if it's in a purified form, a refined form, like fruit juice, or if it's in like honey or something like that, because honey has lots of fructose in it, then what happens is your body is overloaded. Your liver is overloaded, and it gets kind of damaged by it. Over time, it leads to what's called fatty liver, where there's a lot of liver fat, and that's because of too much fructose. Your liver doesn't know what to do with it. It stores it in the liver. And that's the same thing that happens when you drink too much alcohol. So here's the thing. You could be alcohol-free and still damage your liver the same way an alcoholic damages their liver. So you'll go from a healthy liver to a fatty liver, whether you're drinking alcohol or not drinking alcohol, and then to cirrhosis of the liver, whether you're drinking alcohol or not, and then eventually your liver can die, and then you need a transplant or you'll die. Not good. So it doesn't matter if it's a refined sugar, if it's high fructose corn syrup or corn syrup, you should be staying away from those. Okay? Look for sugar substitutes that have a low glycemic index and a low glycemic load. Better off if there's just no glycemic index or a very, very minimal one. Now, a lot of people out there are promoting xylitol and sorbitol and maltitol, but those three actually have enough blood sugar to be dangerous for somebody who's already a diabetic or has other metabolic disorders. Don't ever buy anything with maltodextrin in it. Maltodextrin has a higher glycemic index than any of the sugars. Okay, maltodextrin is somewhere between 100 and 150 on the glycemic index scale, whereas corn syrup is 75, glucose is 100, lactose is 45, sucrose is 65, molasses is 54, maple sugar is 54, honey is 50, sorghum is 50, brown rice syrup is 25, table sugar is 80, high fructose corn syrup is 87. Okay, so all of those are bad for health. And when you look at xylitol and sorbitol and maltitol, it's lower than those, but still, when you're a diabetic or pre-diabetic or have other metabolic disorders, mental health disorders, dementia, poor cognitive function, fatty liver, cirrhosis of the liver, and so on and so forth, there are a lot of other problems caused by sugar and salt that I'm not discussing today. That can be enough to make it worse. So you want to look for sugar substitutes that have erythritol, mannitol, sucralose, and unless you have phenylketonuria or a family history of phenylketonuria, aspartame, advantame, isomalt, maybe some lactitol, saccharin, stevia, monk fruit, maybe tagatose. There's advantame and a few others. Allulose. Some of them have a very low GI or glycemic index. Some of them don't have any. You have to be careful, though. Some of them can cause digestive upset, can cause a laxative effect, meaning you're going to go poop very easily and may have diarrhea. If you have that problem, switch from that substance to a different substance. You can experiment, get a small amount of pure allulose, which is known to cause digestive problems, or a small amount of one of the other ones, and test and see how your body reacts to it. But those are the ones that are the safest. Erythritol is very safe. It's safer than mannitol. Sucralose has tentatively been connected to possible leaky gut, but you have to consume a very large amount of it. Stevia is safe. Monk fruit's safe. Again, aspartame can cause or can exacerbate problems with phenylketonuria. So look for those things, okay? Another problem with fructose is it can cause uric acid production, increased uric acid production. Now, in some people, that won't be a problem, but some people have an alternative genetic structure in which it can lead to high blood pressure, kidney stones, and then gout. Gout is where you feel in your lower extremities, especially your feet, the bottom of your feet and your toes, like it's filled with spikes. And it feels like you're walking on spikes all the time. It's extremely painful because uric crystals are forming in there. And so you're actually walking on crystals, spikes of crystals, and it's extremely painful. And the main things other than fructose that cause this are things like beer and different kinds of meats. So cut down on beer and meats if you're having problems with gout. Now, another problem with uric acid is fructose, is that fructose stimulates less insulin production because it's processed by the liver instead of being processed by insulin. And therefore, when your body produces insulin, insulin signals your body to produce leptin, because leptin is what it's a hormone and it tells your body, I'm getting full, I'm getting full, I'm getting full. And the more leptin is in your body, the more your body's going to tell you, oh, you're full. So when you use fructose, your body doesn't tell you that as quickly. Now you're thinking, well, can I eat fruit? Okay, here's the thing. You can eat fruit, but you do have to pay attention to what it's doing to your body. If you're starting to feel that tiredness, maybe stay away from that particular type of fruit. Try other fruits that have more fiber in them. I have on occasion had problems with grapes. Maybe grapes will be fine for you, but you do have to pay attention to how much fiber is in the whole fruit that you're eating. No juicing. No. Whole fruit only. You can blend it up and drink it that way, but do not juice. Do not buy juices. Whole fruits blended, whole foods whole, chew it up in your mouth. That's okay. You can, if you're on a CGM, check your blood sugar, see how quickly it spikes. Look at the software, watch how high it goes and how slowly it spikes. That's all important to let you know which of the fruits you should be avoiding. But fruits in general are much safer than any kind of simple sugars. The somewhat refined things like bread and mashed potatoes and stuff like that, those are starches. They get converted into sugars. You have to watch how your body deals with them. For me, starches like that are not a big deal. I can eat that stuff. It doesn't have a negative impact on me. But for some people, it can be a very big problem. It can lead to weight gain, as well as that hypoglycemic shock where you just don't have enough energy in your blood and you feel like you're going to go to sleep, which is so scary when you're driving a car. So that's pretty much it. To break it down, less salt, less sugar, use sugar substitutes like erythritol, sucralose, aspartame, saccharin, stevia, monk fruit. Avoid a lot of fructose, avoid a lot of glucose. Glucose is used by the brain, but your body and your brain don't need tons of glucose. Eat smaller amounts over time. So if you're eating, say, a pound of food, decrease it very slowly over time, over weeks or months. Because if you decrease it quickly, your brain and body are gonna fight back and say, hey, I want the same amount I've always had. I'm still hungry. Because your stomach is a muscle, and as you eat larger quantities, your stomach it will expand to accommodate that regular larger quantity. So when you have a stomach this big and you're only eating this much, your stomach says, I'm not full, fill me up. But if you just decrease it from this amount to this amount, your stomach doesn't notice. Don't eat until you're full. Eat until you feel comfortable and then stop. Give it about 20, 30 minutes. Wait. See how your stomach feels. If your stomach still is like, I've got lots of space in here, then you can add some more. But don't overdo it because you've already got food in there. Slowly eat. Enjoy your food. Don't gulp it down quickly. And if you can, what I do at work is I've got 2 breaks when I'm at work, and they're each half an hour instead of 15, 30, 15. So I take my lunch and I eat half of it at each of my breaks. When I had 15, 30, 15, I'd eat part of it here, part of it here, part of it here. Spread your meals out over over the day. If you can have 6 meals throughout the day and less sugar at the end of the day, that's great. If you're going to have 3 meals, make sure your biggest meal is breakfast, which is a complete breakfast, not just like cereal or something like that. And then your lunch should be smaller. Your dinner should be the smallest thing. And again, look at glycemic index and glycemic load. You're going to have to learn which things are going to trigger that overproduction of insulin that makes you sleepy, so you can avoid eating too much of those things. And again, if you're going to eat your desserts after a complete meal with greens and fibrous things and stuff like that, so that you don't overdo it. Don't eat a lot of meat. Don't eat a lot of processed foods. I forgot to mention that. I'm sorry, but processed foods are a big reason you get too much sugar, too much salt, and too much oil, and it's killing you, and it's hurting you, and they want you to be sick, because that means more money for them through medicine and through surgery. If you walk every day, get your heart rate up without getting your breathing rate up, that will help. Get off your butts every day, half an hour, whatever you can do. If all you can do is 5 minutes before you're breathing hard, do it. Do it multiple times a day if you can, because the more you do it, the more you're going to burn. As you're lowering your salt intake, you're going to lose weight because your body's storing less water. So take all of these things and drink more water. Take care of yourself. I know there are supposed experts out there saying it's not your fault, it's your brain doing it to you. But you are in control of yourself. You can make the choices. I know you may be addicted and it's going to be a struggle for you. So you do things slowly. Switch from white rice to brown rice and black rice slowly if you're having problems with starches. Switch from white breads to whole wheat breads slowly. Do everything slowly so your brain isn't fighting back. Because when you jump from here to here, your brain is going to fight you. Your body, your stomach is going to fight you. I hope this has helped. Again, I am not an expert. I'm sharing what I've learned. Last year, I learned that if I replaced one meal with blended fruits and vegetables, whole fruits and vegetables, I could lose 1 pound a day. I also, in a matter of 6 months, I didn't do that thing the whole time because I wasn't sure if there were going to be adverse effects or not. I did it short term, and I was losing 1 pound a day. But over a period of 6 months, I lost 40, 45 pounds. I went from not being able to see my toes to being able to see part of my feet without bending over to look. And my stomach went from, I think I was a 40-inch waist to a 34. And when I was in high school, my waist was a 32. Now, get this. This is going to blow your mind. My weight for most of my life has been 180. From the time I finished high school until I came back to America from Indonesia, my weight was almost always around 180. But my waist size, despite having the same weight, my waist size went from 32 to 40. And now I'm working it slowly back down to 32, and I'm down to 160. I have less palpitations. I have less pre-angina. I'm feeling good. And I'm happy because I don't want my children to be orphans. You can do it too. Don't give up. You only fail when you give up. Thanks for watching. I hope you have a great day and a great life.